Hi, this is Robin, and this video is focused on how to use and create color lookup tables for color grading. I demonstrated how to use color grading tools in Photoshop's Camera Raw filter to create mood in another video on my channel. And in that video, I explained the differences between color correcting and color grading. And I also covered the symbolism and cultural meaning often associated with different colors. If you're interested in that type of information, please check out that other video too. It's located in my Photoshop color grading series on my channel. But this video, as I said, will be focused on using color lookup tables for color grading. And what I'd like to do is start by defining what are lookup tables. So they're generally referred to by their abbreviation, which is LUTs. So that's L-U-T-S. LUTs were initially used in filmmaking to add color to videos to help shape mood, but they're also extremely useful for processing still photos as well. LUTs are, I guess the best way to describe them is they're simple to use color presets. You can also think of them as looks or filters that can be applied to your images in one step. And what they do is they alter the red, green, and blue, or the RGB values in photos. Now, when I think of LUTs and using LUTs, I typically think of about four benefits that come to mind immediately. So the first is that they do cut down processing time quite a bit. They're basically one step to apply them. So unlike those color grading tools that I demonstrated in the Camera Raw filter, which took a lot of steps and had you working with sliders and color wheels, etc., for the shadows, midtones, and highlights individually, as I said, this is a one step to apply a LUT. Another benefit to LUTs is that they can completely change the color tones, and the mood or feeling of your images. And they can create really unique stylizations for your images if you want to, and use them to establish your own personal look. Because they're simple to use, I find that I really like LUTs because they easily let me experiment with different colors and looks and just find an appearance or a look or an approach to an image that I might not have thought of if I couldn't experiment so easily. So just to give you a flavor, let's look at this picture of this little girl here with the dandelions in the field. Now, this is a stock photo, and if I knew whose it was, I would give them credit, but I did not take this shot. And this is a shot that's pretty much out of camera, and you can see there's different things going on with it. There's a distraction here, and there's little branches and whatever. But from the standpoint of a LUT, this little girl, it's a nice enough picture, but when we apply some layers with a LUT to it, it can give it a whole different look, and it sort of goes from kind of a harsh, out of camera look to a soft, warm, dreamy kind of a look. To me, this kind of a look could be more editorial or something you'd see in an ad or something like that, versus it just being kind of more snapshotty. To me, it has more mood and feeling and dreaminess to it. So that's the kind of thing that applying a LUT can do to your images. Now, granted, just full disclosure here, the LUT is not getting rid of these distractions and like this pole and some of these broken off stalks. I had to do that kind of cleanup in Photoshop first, but you can use a LUT to get a whole different color look to your images. Now, we can also use LUTs to develop a more distinctive style or look for all of our images. So if you'd like your overall portfolio of all your images to have a more identifiable look for you, then what you could do is, after you develop and process your images however you like, then if you apply a LUT at the end, you can have this sort of established look or feel to all of your images that are posted. If that's too extreme and you don't want everything to have sort of a thumbprint that's yours, as it were, stylistically on it, then even if you're just doing a project or a series with a few images and want to apply a LUT to each of the images in that series, then it will help tie them better together and help make them hang together better as a set and give them a consistency that might be useful for a series of images. And I think the last main benefit that I can think of for LUTs is that you can use them to visually tie together separate pieces of composites. Now, I like to do composites, and if you're not aware, composites are made up of multiple disparate pieces, so separate elements that have all been put together into a single scene. And no matter how careful you might be with masking, selecting, matching colors, matching shadows, things like that, sometimes composites still have sort of this, I guess, for lack of a better word, piecey look to them. They still look like they're separate pieces. And it can get distracting to viewers if they start feeling like what they're really looking at is cutouts in a composite. So by overlaying a LUT over the final composite, the color tones and the way that it's applied can kind of make all the pieces just kind of flow together more smoothly, so it looks like it's a unified kind of an image. So I like to use them in that regard more so than textures for me, because then it doesn't take away from the photographic look of my composites. And then the final benefit that I wanted to mention is not so much just a benefit of working with LUTs, but the benefit of working with LUTs in Photoshop. Because when we work with LUTs in Photoshop, we get to use the full range of adjustment layers that are available to build looks. So if we look in our layers panel and then look at the adjustments, all these different capabilities and adjustment layers that are available, whether it's brightness, contrast, curves, black and white, gradient maps, we can use all of them to construct the LUTs that we are going to apply to our images. And in addition, we have the benefit of being able to adjust the opacity and use various blend modes to combine all those things together to get very distinctive looks. I mean, the possibilities for how you could work with them are endless if you want to, or else you can just use LUTs on their own, apply the look, and do a one and done type of an approach. Now, what I wanted to talk about and demonstrate in this video was working with both pre-made LUTs and custom LUTs. So when you get Photoshop and you buy Photoshop, it comes bundled with about 30 LUTs in it. So you have a starter set. But you can also download other LUTs from the web, and some of the sites that I'm most familiar with are places like lutify.me, so that's lutify.me, and I believe you have to pay for the LUTs from them, but you can get freebies from Rocket Stock and from On1, and then just load them into Photoshop, and you can use them along with the ones that came bundled with Photoshop. Now, you can find those preloaded LUTs in the site from your Layers panel. Go down to the Add Adjustment Layer icon and come down to Color Lookup. And when you see Load 3D LUT in your Properties panel, these are where your LUTs will appear. So I'm going to show you how to work with some of those. And then beyond that, beyond working with the pre-made LUTs, I'm also going to show you you can make your own custom LUTs and export them to use them again. So let's get started with the demos. I think that's enough background, and I'll walk through some of these things again more slowly. So for the demonstration of how to work with pre-made LUTs, I'm going to use this landscape photo here. And as I've mentioned in my other videos, I always like to duplicate my background layer. So just click on it and drag it down to the square with the plus icon to add a new layer. And then you get a duplicate copy of the background there, so you're not working on your original image. You also could do a Command or Control J and jump it up there to that. That's just another way to duplicate a layer. Okay, so we're going to work with pre-made LUTs and see if we can change the look and color grade the look of this landscape photo. So what we're going to do, and maybe I should stop quickly and just do what I've done in my other videos. I have customized my Photoshop workspace, and yours might not look exactly like mine. So I just want you to know where I'm working so you can find the same panels and tools on your setup. So my layers panel is right up here at the top right, and my properties panel is down here at the lower right, and my toolbar is docked to the right. So I like to keep everything pretty much to the right. Okay, so let's go to the layers panel, like here, and yours might be down at the bottom, layers panel. And then we're going to select the icon for new adjustment layer. So come down to the bottom of that panel, go to that circle with the line through it, which is the add new adjustment layer icon, and then scroll down to where it says color lookup. And when you have that highlighted with blue, just left click, and it has added a new adjustment layer for color lookups there. Okay. Now what you have to do is come down to the properties panel for this color lookup layer, and you'll see that it says 3D LUT file, and there's a little tick mark there. So just leave that. There's nothing you need to do. Just scroll right across to where it says load 3D LUT and come to where there's this little down arrow and click on that, left click, and you'll get this pop-up. Now you can see I have quite a bit more than the 30 LUTs that came bundled with Photoshop, because I have downloaded them from other sites and I have created some of my own. So what I want to do is look for some way that I think would be interesting to adjust this base image. And to me, it looks just kind of a little dull and washed out. So when I look at this image, the first thing that strikes me is there's a lot of snow on these mountains. So maybe I'd like to give it a little bit cooler, more wintry look. So I'm going to scroll down, and these LUTs that are listed here are all in alphabetical order. And if I want to crisp this up, I'm looking at crisp here. This caught my eye. So crisp winter, and if this looks wintry, I'm going to start with that. So you scroll down to a look that you think you'd like to try, highlight it with the blue, left click, and it's applied it. So see what I mean about it being fast and simple? I mean, that's it. It's gone from this to this by applying that crisp winter LUT. So I'm going to double click on the text here, and just so we can remember, I'm going to write crisp winter. So we remember that that's the crisp winter LUT. Okay, now you could stop right there if you like the look and whatever of those LUTs you choose for your image. If you like how it looks just as it's applied, that's great. But you can also adjust it and modify it. So to me, this is a little bit intense. So what I'm going to do in my layers panel is come to where there is the opacity setting. And I think I'm going to reduce this a little bit from how the LUT was applied. So the way I work with opacity, you could also click on this little down arrow and pull this to the left, but I prefer to just left click and keep that left click mouse button depressed on the word opacity and just start dragging left till I see, I'm looking at the image to see where it looks right to me. And I'll stop it right about there, I think. Now, the other thing you can do if you want to tinker with the LUT a little bit is try different blending modes on it. And the word normal is what appears by default in the blend mode. So if you left click on this little down arrow, you see all the different blend modes. And if you hover over them and mouse over them as you go through, you see how what kind of effect they will have on your image. And since I really mostly wanted to add the cooler colors for the wintry look, I'm going to stick with the color blend mode for my image. So again, you can experiment for yours. And I think I'm going to just leave that there. So yeah, so we've given this a more wintry, cooler kind of a look. So I'm just going to leave that as my first example of what a LUT can do for your image. And why I like to do this way is, and now I'm going to turn off the little layer I and turn off the visibility and go back to my background copy and try another LUT. So I'm going to try 3 different LUTs. And if you keep them like this in a stack and label them, then you can compare and contrast. And if you want to try some different approaches, it's almost like taking a snapshot, and then you can see which one that you like the best. So let's try another look. So again, Layers panel, come down to the bottom to the Add Adjustment Layer icon, which is the circle with the line through it. Come down to Color Lookup, left click on that, and we've got another color lookup layer. So we'll go to the Properties panel for this active layer, go to Load 3D LUT, click on that little down arrow to bring up the list of LUTs. And since we just did winter, why don't we try something for fall or autumn? So let's see. So there's an autumn look. I know from using that in the past, it can be really orange. So I think what I'm going to do is try this fall colors instead. Yeah, so this just warmed it up without it being overly orange. So again, let's turn off the eye and just compare that to the original, because we've hidden the one we made before. So we're just comparing it to the original. Okay, so that has a really nice kind of a look to it, I think, for a pre-made LUT. But let's just experiment and try to lower the opacity a little bit and see what we can do here. So I don't want to go too much. I'm looking at the image, so sorry if I go dead air here, but I'm just looking to see what looks right on the image to me. All right, let me stop that there, and then maybe I'll try another blend mode on this. So let's see just where I am here. Okay, so that's subtle. So let's go to the blend mode thing again, and let me this time try a different blend mode. All right, so this kind of gives it a little, crisps up the image a little bit and gives it a little bit more punch. Might want to lower the opacity just a little bit more because it might be a little bit much. Let's see. Yeah, so that's subtle. To me, that looks more fallish. That looks more wintry. Yeah. Okay. So now we can turn off the eye visibility for this, and this was my fall colors LUT. And again, these are the pre-made LUTs. And then maybe let's just try one more and see. So again, activate that copy layer so you can tell it's active by the white frame around it. In your layers panel, go to the bottom to the Add Adjustment layer. Come down to where it highlights Color Lookup and left click, and we get our third option. And you know, I sort of like the look of the little girl that I just showed you the picture, because it just had kind of this softer, dreamy, hazy look to it. So, and part of what I think did that look is when I built it was I think I included kind of a pinkish kind of a hue in it. So let's see if we can find where that might be and add that to this. So Layers panel, Add Adjustment Layer icon at the bottom of the panel, left click, come down to highlight Color Lookup and left click. Okay. And now we can, oh, we ended up with a different layer. Okay, sorry. And now we can come down to this Properties panel, and let's see if I can find something that's sort of pink. There's a scroll bar over here, so if you end up with a lot of them like I have, you can just drag it down. I'm just scanning as I go here. Here, this must have been the one I used. So there's a pinkish hue. So I'll left click on that. Yeah, and you can see that that's given it a softer kind of look. And it could be, more of a dream sequence, kind of a thing, depending on the mood you want to project in your picture. So this one I was going to call Pink Hue, just so I remember which LUT I used. So again, these were all pre-made LUTs, and I think that looks kind of nice. So let's just not bother to make any opacity or blend mode changes to this. Now, something else I wanted to point out to you, so you can see. So again, let me light up all of these and I'll just show you the difference. So if we go to that look, that's our winter look. That's our fall colors look. And that's our pink hue, okay? Now, if I come down and add another color lookup layer down here, all right. It's not behaving. Okay, there we go. What I wanted to do was just show you something about the file extension. So go to the Properties panel, go to Load 3D LUT, click on your down arrow, and what you will notice is first of all of the pre-made LUTs, or the LUTs that are stored in Photoshop, are in alphabetical order. So you can just scroll down, and if you have favorites you like, you can find them more easily that way. But if you look further to the right, you'll see that there's different file extensions. So there's Look, Cube, 3DL, and I'm looking to see, I don't see it, but the 3DL file extension, like this one here, stands for 3D LUT. The Cube file extension is a very common one. There's another one that's CSP, but I'm not seeing it here, which stands for Cinespace. And all of the LUTs with those kinds of extensions will be compatible in Photoshop and will work with your RGB mode images. So if you are downloading LUTs or looking for LUTs on the web to add to the base collection in Photoshop, feel free to use any that have a 3DL, Cube, or CSP extension to them. And you can also use these ones that have a .look file extension. So the look files were exported from SpeedGrade color grading program that's used for video production, but it's also compatible here in Photoshop for use with still images. So those are the compatible formats if you are looking for additional LUTs to add to your collection in Photoshop. Now, I had thought about layering these pre-made LUTs as one-off, like I was going to look at them as options and then pick a layer that I liked. But it's certainly possible too to layer multiple layers and just blend and combine them all together, so you can use it in any way you like. And then once you get a look you like, so let's say I do want to stick with this pinkish hue look, then I can flatten this file, this layer stack, and just do a save as and save this image with that LUT applied. Now, what I typically do in my images is, first of all, I will use a save as so I don't overwrite my original image. And usually I'll just add something to the file name. So if there's the number that the image was coming out of my camera, then I'll add a dash or an underscore, and then I might say pink hue LUT or something like that, because then if I process this same picture in a different way, I have some kind of descriptor in my file name that lets me know which file was processed in what way. So that's just a little tip for how I work with saving things of that nature. Now, besides working with the pre-made LUTs, which is what we just did here, you can also create and export your own custom LUTs that you create. But there are some conditions that you have to follow in order to make a custom LUT. So they are, you must be working with an RGB color mode image. So if we come up here, let me just click on this layer, to your image file menu and come down to mode and then just go over to the flyout menu, you'll see it's clicked that this is an RGB color image. So I would imagine that most, unless you're doing things for commercial printers and working with CMYK, I would imagine that most of the images you're going to be working with will be RGB and you don't need to check them. But just do be sure if your LUTs, your custom LUTs are not taking, that you are working with an RGB image mode. Okay, so that's the first consideration. The second thing that you need to think about is that you do need to have a background layer. And by that, I mean the layer that says background, so not this duplicate layer that I created, but you have to have a background layer with the lock on it, or else when you go to create your custom LUT, it won't work. So that's important too. And then you must have one or more adjustment layers. So again, they don't need to all be LUTs that were applied. You can come to the bottom of your layers panel to this add adjustment layer and add a stack of any combination of these adjustment layers, including LUTs, to create a custom LUT. The only consideration with these adding the adjustment layers is do not make any changes to the masks on those layers. Just work with the settings, the properties that appear for the adjustment layers. Do not alter the masks, because then if you go to add it onto another image, it's just not going to fit because the mask won't fit the other image. So that's my advice for getting started doing custom LUTs. Okay, so let's move to a different image. I want to work with this image here to create a custom LUT, and again I'm going to duplicate my background layer, so just so we don't get confused with the word background, I'm going to just call that one duplicate, so I'm not working on my original image. So we still have what I said was a requirement, which is to have a background layer with a lock on it, but we're going to work above here to start. Okay, now I have in my other video, the one I told you about color grading using the Camera Raw filter, as I said, I talked about the differences between color correcting and color grading. And what I said in that video is that you should color correct, and I walked through how to do it, so you might want to look at that video too, before you start the color grading part of your process. So this image here, this example image, I've already changed, I've already color corrected this image from how it looked out of camera. And I have now prepped it to be able to do the color grading. So you can color correct your images before you start this color grading process, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to take this sort of, I think it's kind of cheerful, nice, you know, suburban street, suburban house, from this sort of cheerful, friendly neighborhood shot to a more ominous, dusky, you know, early blue hour kind of a shot. And so what I'm going to do is I will add multiple adjustment layers in order to get the look I want for this image. And then after I create that look, or I guess another way to say it is that recipe for that look, then I'm going to save it as a custom LUT. So that's when I want to teach you how to make your own custom LUTs that you can save and export. And then once you've done that, then you can apply that LUT, just like I showed you how to use the pre-made ones. You can apply your LUT to other images. So if you want to use it on your full portfolio, if you want to use it just on other images you shot at a specific time and place so that they look consistent, however you want to use it, you can use them as a starting point for something else. But this is just a way to create your own custom LUT. Okay, so we have our color corrected. In fact, why don't I just do that here? I'll say that this is the color corrected layer. Okay, and we're going to then add a layer on top of that I'm going to use a LUT to do that. So again, we're in our layers panel. We come down to the add adjustment layer icon, left click on that. That's the circle with the line through it. Come down to color lookup. Okay, so now we've added a color lookup layer. And what I want to do first is, because there's already this kind of yellowy grass, I'd like to give the overall image kind of a more fall look. So I'm going to probably end up using that same kind of LUT that I just used a moment ago. So we're going to come down, or if it's for you, it's up. Go to your Properties panel, go to Load 3D LUT, click the down arrow, and let's look for that fall colors. Here we go. So here's the fall colors, and this is a look style LUT, okay? All right, so you can see very clearly how it has altered the color corrected image to give it a lot more warm colors like you'd expect in the fall. Now, to me, that's like way too intense, and I want to pick up some of this color, but not this much. So again, because I want to do that, I am going to work with a blend mode, and I'm going to use a color blend mode to get some of the color applied. So we've got the warmth added to the scene, but it's not as intense as that was. And I'm also going to lower the opacity some, just so it's still not too much. Since we're going to have this at night, I don't want too much glaring color. And again, I'm left clicking on opacity and dragging, and I'm watching the image to see. So if I stop talking here for a moment, I'm just thinking and looking and trying to figure out. All right, let me leave it there. I think that's going to be, yeah, because it adds the subtle warmth, but it's not over the top. Okay, and if I want to tone down these yellows yet a bit more, what I'm going to do is add a hue saturation adjustment layer to try to work just on the yellows. So again, bottom of the layers panel, go to the icon circle with the line through it for add adjustment layer, and I'm going to come down to hue saturation, and I'm going to left click on that. So now we've got a hue saturation layer. Now, since the main thing I want to reduce are these yellows, if we look at our properties panel, by default for hue saturation layer, it's set to master. And what that means is it's going to affect all the colors in your image, and we don't want to do that. I just want to work with the yellows in this particular image, and you might only want to work with certain colors in your image. So come to the side where it says masters, to the little down arrow, and just click on whatever color you want to work with or impact in some way, working with hue and saturation. So I want to reduce the yellows. So now that I've got that, I am going to grab my saturation slider, and I want to reduce it because I want to take away some of the yellow. So let's see here. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, that's taking away just kind of that edge that I didn't like. And because this is, again, going to be a dusk sort of a look, I don't want to have this too light and bright because that looks like daylight. So you have to think of the logic of what you're doing too. So I'm going to come to my lightness slider also for this particular image, and I'm going to make that less bright. So I'm going to pull that to the left because that's the negative. That's taking away from the brightness. So you can see it's darker and lighter. And that actually ended up, yeah, all right. I like that because it's a little duller, because you just have to keep thinking about what's the logic in what you're doing. All right, so now the next thing we have to do is, since I said I want this to be more of a blue hour or dusky, so blue hour, well, the key term is blue. So we're going to go to our layers panel, down to another adjustment layer. And this time I want to add a LUT, so a color lookup. And let me come down or go up, wherever you're going, to the properties panel, to where it says load 3D LUT. Click on that down arrow. And what I want is something that's blue, because it's the blue hour, but I don't want it too dark, so we're not late, it's dusk. So here we go, early blue should work. So I'm going to click on that, left click, and we've got the, I'm going to label it early blue LUT. Okay. All right, so now for that early blue LUT, this is, again, it's too crisp, it's too contrasty for what I want, but it got me that blue color in there. So what I need to do is, first of all, it's too glary, so I want to only have the blue impact parts of the image. So I'm going to pull this down, tonal parts of the image. So I'm going to use the blend mode that's luminosity. And so I've changed this to a luminosity blend mode. And I also want to reduce the opacity on this because this is just too harsh right now. So I come to opacity and I'm going to drag that to the left and watch my image and see when I feel like it's looking like where it should be. Maybe up a little bit from there. I don't know. I'm going to go back down a little bit. All right, let me leave it there. I'm not going to get too perfection-y because you're not going to be working with this image. I just want to show you the process. So anyway, so I've made my next tier of LUT adjustments here that I need to make. Okay, so now we need to get us into more of a real dusk because this is still not dusk. We've just gotten it more into looking bluish. So next step is, again, layers panel, add adjustment layer with the circle with the line through it, come down to color lookup, and then in the properties panel, load 3D LUT, click, and what I'm going to look for is something that sounds like night. I'm just scanning down. Here we go. This sounds good. So there's a LUT called night from day that I have in here. And since this is a very daylight scene and I want it to look like night, then I'm going to go night from day and click and apply that LUT. So again, you can see what the LUT has done. It's just completely changed the look. And I think it's taken us pretty nicely into a dusky kind of a time of day scene. So I'm going to reduce the opacity just a little bit because I don't want it too dark, but it's pretty close to where I want it. So I'm left clicking on opacity and dragging down, let's stay in there. And then maybe I will try another blend mode on this layer and see what it does here. What do I want to try? Darken, multiply. I think it's too dark and it's too harsh. So I'm going to go with darker color just to see. And again, you do not need to do these things if you feel comfortable with it, but I'm just letting you know that you can try different blend modes, you can try different opacities, or you can leave it straight. So I really like how this looks for a dusk kind of a scene. And I'm going to label this layer night from day, and that's the LUT, name of the LUT that I used on that layer. So I'm building up my recipe, my formula here for how I want this LUT, custom LUT to look. Now, what I said at the beginning is I wanted it to be kind of ominous or eerie or whatever, and I don't know, I mean, it just sort of looks like a nice, quiet suburban neighborhood. So I'm going to hope I don't push the boundary too far here, but I'm going to try one more LUT and see if I can take this to a little bit more eerie kind of a look. So bottom of the layers panel, click on the add adjustment layer icon, come to color lookup. In your properties panel, load 3D LUT list, and bleached cube. Bleached would probably be kind of cool. Bleach bypass could do it. What else is there? I'm going to go with futuristic bleak. All right, because I think I've used that before. Yeah, so this gives it to me kind of more of a sci-fi, kind of a creepy green overlay to it, but it's taken away all the color. So first of all, I just want to add a hint of this kind of creepy green as I am thinking of it here. And so again, I'm going to start with the blend mode, and I'm going to just use color so that we get some of that green in there. But again, we've taken away most of the colors and I don't care for that. So I want to also reduce the opacity a lot. And we're going to do about a 48, 47. What's looking right here? It looked good around here. Yeah, I kind of like around there. Okay, so I'm going to just leave it at that stage. And this was, what did I say? This is futuristic, bleak, LUT. Okay. All right. So now I've got my layers of my components that I want, a mix of LUTs, hue saturation. You can use any mix of adjustment layers you want. I'm going to turn off the eye visibility on my color on my backup layer because I just don't want that active when I'm saving the LUT. So we need the background layer with the lock and the adjustment layers in order to make this work. So what we're going to do to save this custom LUT that we've created, so the recipe for what this look is we'll go up to the File menu at the upper left click on that to expand, come down to where it says Export, then go to the flyout menu and come down to where it says Color Lookup Tables. And again, you won't have these colors showing up on yours. I have just highlighted certain features that I use regularly. Left click where it says Color Lookup Tables, and you'll get this pop-up box. And so now this is where you're going to dictate what the format is going to be for your custom LUT. So again, you can type in a description, and normally what I do is just type in what I want the LUT title to be. So let's call this Ominous Dusk. Okay, that's my title for this, what this custom LUT is going to be. You can enter in copyright information if you like. So I just put in my initials, but you can use anything you like or leave it blank. It's up to you. And then leave the settings for quality the way they are here. So grid points 32 medium is just fine. You don't need it to take up any more space than that. That's a good quality. And then you have to choose a format. So as I mentioned before, the 3DL, Cube, and CSP are all compatible formats for when you're working with an RGB mode image. Don't use ICC profile, that's for something else. But I recommend not choosing all of them, just pick Cube. I think that's makes it easier if you just have a consistent format, and the Cube format does work compatibly with the software, so stick with that. And then all you have to do is then click on OK. And I'm not going to do it because the processing power makes my computer crash when I'm trying to run it along with the recording software here. So when you click OK, you will be prompted to where you want to save your custom LUT. So you have basically, and I'm going to hit cancel so that we don't get into a crash mode here. You essentially have two choices. So you can either create a folder for all your custom LUTs and just save them to that folder. Or if you were going to use the LUT regularly, if you know this is a LUT that you're going to use a lot, what you can do is you can put them directly into the Photoshop 3D LUTs presets folder, so that when you want to use your LUTs, they'll show up in that same expanded list. So if you put them into the Adobe 3D LUTs preset folder, then they'll show them in that list. So let me show you where you can put it to do that here. So if you're going to use them regularly, these would be the folders that you would use. So for a Windows computer like what I have, then you'd go Program Files, Photoshop, let's say, for instance, CC 2023, Presets, and then 3D LUTs. So that's the file or the folder hierarchy where it would go. I don't use a Mac, so I'm just going to trust that this is the correct thing for the Macs. If you do have an earlier version of Photoshop, then obviously you're not going to put CC. You'd use CS5 or CS6 or whatever it is that is the program that you are working with. And if you do put them into your custom LUTs saved to one of these folders, then as I said, it will come up when you go to the list over here as part of the list. If you don't do that, so let me add just another adjustment layer here. Color lookup. Okay, so we have a new blank color lookup layer. If you go down to your properties or up to your properties panel and come to load 3D LUT, click that down arrow. If you have not added it to the folder, then what you would do is you would click on load 3D LUT. And then what you would have to do is go to the folder. Let's see, do I have my images, LUTs, custom. So then you would go to your custom folder for where you've saved LUTs and you would click on it there and hit load. So let me see if I can get out of here and do that. So let me turn off all of these. So we're back to our original image. We're going to have our newly added color lookup layers. We're going to come down to load 3D LUT. Let's hope this works. Click where it says load 3D LUT versus on a LUT name. And my images, LUTs, custom LUTs, and let's click on here, and hopefully this will load and not crash. There we go. So we end up with the same kind of look that we've now saved as we had created with all of these layers. So it's all ready to go with a single click look. Okay, so the recipe that was contained in all of these layers of adjustment layers that you built up gets saved in one LUT. And as I said, you can either save it to a folder on your computer and load it the way I just showed you, or you can put it into one of these folders depending on the type of computer you have. And then what you would have to do, then you could just go to that big long list and it would be in there. So those were the main things that I was going to show you with regard to working with pre-made LUTs and creating and saving and exporting your own custom LUTs. Now, I also could show you some bonus approach for something that's hidden in Photoshop. So if you're interested in that, you can keep watching for one more little approach here. But for those of you who this was enough and you're ready to go, thank you for watching, and I hope this approach to using lookup tables or LUTs helps you with your color grading. It really helps the algorithm for YouTube. If you liked this and found it useful or got something out of it that you didn't know before, if you could hit the like under the video with the thumbs up, and it would help others to find this content more easily because it puts it higher up in the search engines for people if there are more likes. Also, if you want to hit subscribe below the video, it's free to subscribe. You won't get any marketing or other emails from me, but you will get a single notification from YouTube when I do add more Photoshop educational content to my channel. So if you want to subscribe and subscribe all, if you click on the little bell there, I think you can subscribe to all. Then whenever I add content 1 to 2 times per month, you would be alerted to it. Okay, so now let me move on to the bonus content to find some hidden approach. So what this is you can also create an Adobe Camera Raw profile from your custom LUTs, so that if you want to apply the LUTs as a profile to your raw images, then you can do that from the Camera Raw filter or from Adobe Camera Raw. So what you would do for this is to go to the filter menu, come down to Camera Raw filter. Oops, I forgot I wasn't on a whatever layer. Here we go. Filter, Camera Raw filter. Let's try that again. Okay, and so now we are in the Camera Raw filter interface. You can see it's a different interface. Now what you have to do is go see where you find these little 3 dots that are right over here on the right. Okay, so you have to left click on those little 3 dots, and what that does is brings up some choices for you. And one of those choices is create preset. Okay, so I can't hover over it or it disappears. So it's right below where the blue line is highlighted. And what you need to do is something sort of tricky. So at the exact same time, you need to press and hold the Alt or Option key, so Alt for PC and Option for a Mac, and click on those words Create Preset at the same time. So I'm going to press for my computer Alt or Option and Create Preset at the same time. Let's see if this works. There we go. And what you get popping up is this box that says Create Profile. So now you would, in where it says name, you'd create the name of the preset. So let's say I had called it Ominous Dusk, or I could do it as separate words. There we go. Okay, and then once we get that, what we need to do is come down to where it says Color Lookup Table, down all the way down at the bottom of this pop-up box. So just ignore all this other stuff here. And then you have to left click in there. And I'm not going to do it because, again, I have a feeling it's going to crash the computer with this video software running. But you would left click in this box where it says Color Lookup Table. And then that will ask you to go to the place where you stored your custom LUT. And then you would just hit that. It will fill it in here. And then you will have saved your custom LUT as a Camera Raw filter. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of this. So then when you come in with a, let's say you have a new Camera Raw image that you want to work on, you would come to where it says profile. So you've gone through that process. You've stored your custom converted profile from your custom LUT. You go to where it says profile and just come across to these 4 boxes and left click on that. And then what you get, let me hide that, is you look for the area that says user profiles. And you left click on that. And it will expand, and whatever you saved, so here is my Ominous Dusk profile that I had created a custom LUT, and now I've created a Camera Raw filter profile from that custom LUT using that procedure I just told you. And then the nice thing here is that you also have this amount slider. So if you want to crank it up or crank it down, or you can, just say how much intensity you want this to be applied with. So by doing those extra few steps, if you think you want to be able to apply profiles in the Camera Raw filter, that's another way to convert your custom LUT to be used in that way. So again, thanks for sticking around, thanks for viewing, and try experimenting with LUTs because I think you'll be pleased with some of the color grading effects that you can get with them. Take care.